Dominic Fragman here with the spirit of innovation and freedom, and this is Progress Culture. Progress Culture is a weekly happening where master drummer Paul F. Murphy and I share live improvised music and impromptu conversations with people from various fields and expertises about community, value, art, science, freedom, and progress for all. The show started during the coronavirus pandemic and is recorded weekly in an airport hangar in California, Maryland at TechPort, a University of Maryland research facility in the Innovation District of St. Mary's County, Southern Maryland. Our music has been recognized as a brand new sound in music, and we love to share our work and the mindset of improvisation, innovation, and creativity from our perspective, as well as others in the community. We are excited to share it all with you, so have a listen and see what's going on this week on Progress Culture. Now, let's get into the show. But first, let's hear some music. Hello, everybody. Dominic Fragman here with the spirit of innovation and freedom for this week's episode of Progress Culture with master drummer Paul F. Murphy. Hey, Paul.
Hey, Dominic. Great to be here.
Always a pleasure to have you. We are flying solo or duo. Duo.
Duo.
Solo. We have decided that today we would like to speak with each other. We haven't had a chance to do an episode like this, and in these times we still are facing with the COVID pandemic and shutdowns and partial shutdowns or re-shutdowns. We aren't always prepared or desiring to bring in guests, and guests aren't always prepared and desiring to come in at this point. So we would take this opportunity to speak to you guys as the spirit of innovation and freedom and the work that we are doing with music to bring positivity and art and community to Southern Maryland. And in that vein, we have touched on it throughout the episodes that it is our lifelong passion, whether or not that's many, many decades or only a few, that we have been involved in this musical endeavor. And I know that you've talked about it on here before a couple of times, that starting at a very early age, getting into music. And I was wondering has it always been something that you sort of understood, even at an early age, that you would pursue a creative and spiritual path like this?
I believe when I actually first started, like when I was 5 years old, no, I didn't have really thoughts like that. I was just very interested in the different sounds that different instruments could make, because where we lived and where I grew up, it was basically, an apartment in a tenement house, and we had violin, we had piano, we had guitar, and I was allowed to, try and play or create or do whatever I could do with them, as long as I treated them with very much respect. And over the course of about a year, I decided that I would really like to try drums. And so I ended up with a very, very inexpensive, cheap drum set. But what was good about it is that I got to try to play along with classical violin, blues guitar, and even then rock was starting to come into play, and also classical and blues piano. So I got to, interact with that and those sounds with people that I loved. So I actually did start to develop at that point a love for not only the people that were playing and allowing me to bang my way through, but I started developing a love for the music itself, and actually started having questions about where the music came from. And I would get several different types of answers, Some would be from my mother, some would be my grandmother or my uncle, who also lived in the house. And he also worked as a singer and a construction worker. So I had quite a few different inputs, but all the input pointed and directed to, it came from the love of man expressing his love of the earth. And that really wasn't the answer that I was looking for. I was trying to figure out, well, wait a minute, where's this actually come from, this blues thing? Where?
Right.
And so I did get explanations on that, as well as the classical and the other music that I was hearing. And I did get to hear quite a few different genres of music because, I mean, the Greek temple was right down the street. There were people that were playing in the street in the day and at night. And, you know, I developed a great love and respect for these people that could play so much clearer and so much more defined than anything I was able to do on this drum set I had. So I was there like, well, you know, okay, what about this drum set? I mean, you guys don't play drums, you're playing these other instruments that I'm not necessarily wanting to develop or really create on. I really like these things.
Right.
So at about 6.5 years old, my dad, who was actually working for the post office at the time, he took me down to a club and introduced me to Gene Krupa. And Gene, I had heard recordings of Gene, and of course Sing 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 was like a giant recording back then. So I was doing my best with that to imitate it or play along with it. And when I met Gene, the first thing he said to me after my dad told him that I played drums, and my dad obviously had met Gene before, Gene asked me to sit down and play. So I sat down and played on the back of a metal chair, my version of Sing, Sing, Sing. And Gene nodded and smiled, and then he actually showed me just a couple variations of what I thought it was. And I learned something right then and right there that, oh, here's another person that plays drums, and man, he can really play. And he talked to me, and he actually took my hands and showed me on the back of this chair a couple things that I really didn't perceive before mentally. And from then on, that's how I started. Every time I sat down on these drums that I had, I would start like what I was shown. Mm-hmm. And from there, I just, you know, kept going about it how I was going about it until a couple years later when I started, you know, actually having lessons that, you know, my dad paid for. And throughout the years, I met quite a few individuals who played drums. And every time I met these people that played drums, whether it was Louie Bellson or Philly Joe Jones or Max Roach or Rashied Ali or Sonny Murray or Elvin Jones, they were all very much similar to Gene. Not in looks, not in style, not in how they played, but full of information and very kind, and would always show me something. And from those some things, I would, you know, learn and try to put them into what I was playing. And eventually, I mean, after studying a lot of classical music with Joseph Levitt, after that, I was, you know, in my teens and playing in rock groups. And, you know, playing rock, you know, I liked it, but usually the rock bands, they always wanted, no, it goes like this, it goes like that. Don't put these fills in here. Don't put that fill in here. Don't put the accent there. So I was like a little frustrated, but I'd go to the gig, play the gig, square as could be. And we all got along. I mean, I still know some of those people. Most of them have passed now. But that being said, I was in my teens, and at 16, Billy Taylor, the bass player with Duke Ellington's band for 23 years, and his wife also, who sang for Duke's band, Billy put me in his band in Washington, D.C. And Billy didn't have any advice on how I should play. He just told me to play. Right. And that's what I did until he took me out to his car and put in a cassette, or back then they weren't cassettes, 8-track, and asked me if I knew who Cecil Taylor and Jimmy Lyons were, and I did not. And he said, "This is what you play like. These are the people you need to meet." And so I ended up forming my own group in San Francisco. And then later on in San Francisco, while I was living with Michael Clark, drummer from Herbie Hancock's band, and many others that he has played with, I actually met Jimmy and Cecil and ended up moving back to the East Coast, ended up in New York, and ended up playing in Jimmy Lyons' band for about 12 straight years. Ended up living in a car in New York City for the first, month. Then ended up with a job working at Rashied Ali's club as the doorman, and Rashied Ali was the bartender and owner. And his wife, Patricia, taught me how to do books and handle the money. And so going on from there, Jimmy passed, and I decided that I wanted to naturally continue to play. And that's what I did, and I ended up in Maryland at Pierre Spray's Maple Shade studio and interacted with Larry Willis, who was originally from Blood, Sweat, and Tears, but also most every jazz group that you can name. And Larry and I played together for a long, long time, 30 years. And then I also ended up meeting a young drummer named Dominic Fragman. And now I'm playing with Dominic Fragman on guitar. And Dominic is an excellent drummer. And we are playing totally improvised music, and that's what I do. That's what I like. That's what I love. And I'm going on 72, so I haven't stopped. Still going at it. And I also, had the great pleasure of my life as meeting Jerry Carroll, who is now Jerry Murphy, who is, in my opinion, one of the most exceptional poets on the scene, or even putting things out there that are actually new. And I believe that poetry actually has a great, great impact within the innovation of the music. And so Jerry is also in the group with myself, Dominic, called The Spirit of Innovation and Freedom. So that's a little bit about what you asked me.
the pathway to creativity and spirituality, and you and Jerry have played. Nobody else I've never met. I've had now because of you and her the opportunity to play with, study with, become friends with some pretty iconic people in the music, and even having met those level of people and artists and spiritual entities, I have never met anyone who has been able to facilitate or share or come from the perspective of truth and spirituality. And like I said, the facilitation of it within another person, specifically me. So I guess I'm biased, but just I've had that experience as a result of what you and Jerry have shared with me. I mean, reading Jerry's poetry and reading her books, The Pyramid and January Peace, have had huge impacts on me. And then on top of that, having a teacher or teachers that you have complete access to without ego and all that stuff. You guys have been that for me. Was there, in the many times that I've heard you speak on your past and your history through this pathway of coming up with the Gene Krupa and the Louie Bellsons and the Buddy Riches and through to New York and Rashied Ali's and things like this, where I have you and Jerry as that staple, that significant spiritual rock and guide. Mm-hmm. Did you have that did you have it from more people, or was it something that you felt like you required, or was it in you?
I would say that I really basically had it from my family.
Yeah.
In the very beginning of all of it. And then throughout, I ended up with, like I say, Joseph Levitt and Billy Taylor, and they really taught me a lot about what they thought and what they knew about life and about music and about working in music as well. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, that being said, it's like similar to like some of the people that you have run into, say, a Cecil Taylor. Mm. And I know that you spent a lot of time with Cecil and you played with Cecil. And I know that
what's funny is
he taught you something.
He taught me a lot. I mean,
yeah.
I touched every single book and picture and piece of paper and instrument in that house. Right. Many, many times.
Yeah.
And what's funny is you tell this story of meeting Gene Krupa and playing on the back of a chair, and I kind of have a parallel to that. I have a parallel to your 8-track story with Billy Taylor, as when I met you, we went to your truck and listened to a recording that blew my mind and became the people that I was focused on playing with, and it took me almost 10 years of studying and practicing a lot of practice, a lot of gigs before I came to be able to play with you and Larry
Willis.
Yep.
Right?
And so, there's the parallel there that I've always found interesting, but also there's this parallel, like every time, like when I met you and I asked you if I could study with you, and you said, okay, well, come play for me. And Cecil to play for him. And my first bigger type gig in Manhattan, when I got to Manhattan, the audition that I did for that gig, every time I have never had my entire instrument. I've only had a snare drum. and I've had to like execute, and
Right.
and when I did it for you, it was a miserable fail.
No.
But it's just funny. I guess a tangent there in this side, but I think it's an interesting. When we talk to people about the mindset of creativity and the mindset of innovation, I feel like there's this idea that it's something that you can just jump into, or that there's this path of what you're creating.
Well, I think you can just jump into it, but it's a very, very large pool.
Right.
I mean, because before you met me, I know that you were playing guitar and drums. I know that you played in rock groups.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you also went down and met people like Martina McBride.
That was after. I think that was after I was
in
studying.
Tennessee.
Either way, that was after. But either
Yeah,
way.
but I'm just saying, like, and then,
Yeah.
from there you ran into Cecil, and what I'm trying to say about it is that you still ran into many different forms and styles of music.
And had to deal with them
Right.
as quote unquote correctly as I could.
Right.
Or at least, for me, I think it was, what could I get away with? Like, all right, I'll play it. Like you
I
said.
think that's always what it is.
Yeah, right. I mean, like you said, when you played the more commercial top 40 gigs, it was always sort of has to be done like this.
Right.
So you figure out how much of it has to be done like this that you
Exactly.
can do without like.
Yep.
My thing was, I never wanted to take practice away from the development of the music. So the professional situations, I didn't want to practice for those so much.
Right.
But the practice that I was doing facilitated my ability to navigate them more seamlessly and more seamlessly. And this pathway to creativity and innovation that we talk about, I think one of the big things that gets lost sometimes in the rapid pace of today's practices and expectations and how fast we want to see results and all of these things, and we're going to hire so-and-so to come in and teach us about this thing, and then they'll know it and it'll be good job everybody. And my experience is it does not work anything like that. It requires a tremendous amount of devotion. It requires a tremendous amount of self-assessment and introspection and meditation and the guides.
Right.
I feel like I've been extremely fortunate, and you far more than I have, but when you are aiming to achieve something, it certainly helps to have people that you're learning from and who are guiding you that have achieved that as well, or have achieved beyond that, or whatever. If you're using a model that is, let's just say, for lack of a better way of describing it, that is subpar or hasn't reached that par.
It's also a model of acceptance. I mean, most of those people I mentioned would speak or talk to anyone that spoke or talked with them. But
right.
if they saw that you actually were progressing, they would speak to you and talk to you a lot more. An example of that is like after years and years of having met Louie Bellson, I mean, when Louie got married the second time around, he had, I believe it was 15 drummers play at his wedding. And he asked me to be the premier soloist.
Right.
Now, I hadn't seen Louie in a few years. So, and the music that I was playing, which was totally avant-garde jazz, I mean, I would never have expected that honor or that call.
Mm-hmm.
But he's the one who
Right.
picked that. So I think that acceptance does play a
sure.
great deal in it.
I would say that then there's also, that has been a hurdle for me too, outside of your total acceptance of me or you and Jerry being totally open and sharing without. The only time that I feel like you and Jerry may decide to hold back is when it is something that I'm not ready for yet. Not something that because you don't want to share that with me because that's something that you know and somebody else can't know it yet or something. And it's not like that.
Exactly.
So but outside of that, I found that a lot of people are not willing to open up. I mean, I went in all the cities that I lived in and spent a lot of time in, LA, DC, New York, Nashville, and it was very difficult to get people to be open with you about music. And then, especially if they had a higher profile career, it was like you couldn't even knock on their door.
Right,
so
because like money was in the way.
It wasn't like you were going to find somebody like, I mean, I know that a lot of people who are listening might not be familiar with names like Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich, and Louie Bellson, or even Max Roach, Elvin Jones, and Rashied Ali, but these, especially the earlier names that I just mentioned, they were major stars. I mean, major bands in Hollywood productions, touring the world. And the fact that you could walk up to them and make friends kind of blows my mind, because my experience has been that those people who are considered at that level now, the only way that you could really interact with them is maybe on social media. And how much how much information transfer, because it's not just information, it's the life that you talked about, the philosophy, the spiritual practices, the devotion to the entire creative process.
Well, yeah, and the creative process was not actually based in monetary values.
Sure.
Where a lot of what you see today is based there. And that's part of the reason that you are not able to talk to them, because it's being blocked. Whereas the people that I mentioned, yes, were they making a living? Yeah, they were. Were they making great livings? Sometimes, and some points, but not always. But their devotion to the study and the art of music itself was what they were actually living for. They weren't living for the next record deal.
What do you suggest for somebody that is at a point, however long they've been doing or studying or practicing or executing professionally or not professionally, who are at a point where they're saying that I want to give an uncompromised effort to this thing? How would you help orient them onto that path? Like, if there was
the only way that I know of is from what Jimmy Lyons said to me, and this is really within days of his passing. And he looked at me and he told me, he said, never stop playing drums. Period.
I know that
was that.
What rings true in that, well, I mean, it rings true. And what I also, as we spoke about some parallels earlier, is this is a conversation that you and I have had numerous times. I mean, over the years and even within recent times, I mean, this ride is a roller coaster. And and you tweak out and you have all the doubts in the world and all these things, but the one thing that we sort of always come back to is you just can't stop. No matter what the situation is.
It's just like Jerry. I mean, she continues to write. She's written 2 books. She hasn't made a dime off either one of them, and both of the books are very, very good reads.
really.
I mean, if anybody reads them, they very much like them. But
I think the
because
pyramid
she's
could
not
be like
related to blah-diddy-blah or this person over here that was related to this other mega millionaire, it's not put out there.
I understand that.
Yeah, I understand it too.
Without getting too heavy on down that path. I mean,
I mean, that's just like the conversation I had with the people that ran CBS when I was introduced to them, and they asked me literally, why do you think we should even have you in here to record music like what you guys play?
Right.
Okay? And my answer was, you know what? I understand where you are right now, and that's wonderful. You have limousines and everything else. But I also know that CBS was founded on the recording of sound.
Mm-hmm.
And those people pass that knowledge down through history, and now that it's a giant corporation, you're sitting in the job you're sitting in. Because what we play is art, you're having a problem with letting us record in CBS. Because it's not what everybody is listening to. The next conversation we had was, how long do you think it would take you to record one album? I said 3 hours with 2 hours of setup time. They laughed. And they said, no, really. And I said, yeah, really. 3 hours and 2 hours setup time. And I said, I don't have much money. And they said, how about $1,200? Can you come up with that? Yeah, I can come up with that. I couldn't come up with it, but somebody I knew could come up with it. They said, when can you do it? I said, whenever you're ready. They said, can you do it next week? I said, yeah, we'll be here next week. What day? We went in and did the first recording we did at CBS called In a Dream Stream.
82?
Yeah, I think that was 82. Then from there we did, another recording with Jimmy Lyons, Dewey Johnson from John Coltrane's band, Karen Borka, and Marianne Driscoll piano. Then we moved on to RCA, and RCA allowed us to do the exact same thing. And we were actually the first group that was ever digitally recorded in RCA. So strange things happen, and good positive things also happen.
And I have often said that.
And I thank those people for what they let us do.
And I've often said that you are like one of these Forrest Gump stories where it would blow your minds how much stuff he's actually been involved with and things that have happened. So, but we don't have to get into all that right now. But I will say that in this pathway, having mentors or access to people that have achieved and can share with you then because they have that experience is tremendously valuable. And I feel very fortunate to have that kind of relationship with you and Jerry. And thank you.
Well, we love you and we thank you too, as well.
And I love you both.
Can't wait to play again.
That's where I was going next. So I think that we should do this again, and we should play as soon as possible.
Great.
Good. See you then. Cool. thank you all so much for being with us. We are grateful that you give us your consideration and attention. Please follow and reach out to the Spirit of Innovation and Freedom and TechPort on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube, or at spiritinnovationfreedom.com and techportsomd.org, and also www.progressculture.org. Let us know what you're thinking and what you want to hear about and how you're feeling. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to see you again next week on Progress Culture. Thank you, much love, and see you soon.